Okay, part 2 of answering the question, what about those pink pussy hats? Were they pointless? And is knitting an act of resistance? Is craftivism a crucial component of a resistance movement? Now, part 1, I was responding to somebody who was having an absolute mentee bee about craftivism, in particular knit-ins, in particular the one that Knitting Cult Lady is going to have on March 8th in DC, and the potential to do a satellite event here in Portland or wherever you are. Maybe you want to do a knit-in where you are on March 8th. This person in my comments was freaking out and being like, oh no, it's pink pussy hats all over again. She called craftivists nose pickers for the resistance, called craftivism completely pointless, said that knitting is just a hobby. It can't be used as resistance. And of course I responded immediately, well, Craftivism has raised $650,000 in just a couple of weeks for the resistance efforts in Minnesota because people are all buying this Norwegian melt the ice hat pattern. $5 on Ravelry, and people are making and wearing these red Norwegian hats, which are a time-honored symbol of resistance against fascism. People are buying the pattern and therefore fundraising. People are knitting hats and sending them to folks in Minnesota or in other places where they are protesting out in the cold. People are coming together and doing knitting circles, craftivism events, knit-ins, which Hope called pointless because it's performative. Effective resistance has to be performative. We are putting on a performance to convince people to turn against the regime and to join the pro-democracy movement. Performative elements are, y'all, they're so necessary to a resistance movement. Okay, I realize I could probably put together a whole 2-hour-long bread tube video on this exact subject, knitting as resistance. I have a series of shorter videos up on my YouTube talking about the history of resistance knitting. I think if you take the time to unpack all of the different components of craftivism, and in permaculture we say obtain a yield, if you look at all of the yields that you get out of craftivism events, out of knitting as a form of resistance, or, your quilting bee, your sewing circle, whatever craftivism event you are putting together, or whatever resistance crafting you are doing in your own personal life. When you really examine all of those complexities, you start to understand on a whole other level how successful civil resistance movements are actually built and the kinds of strategies that we employ in order to actually get the job done of stopping the fascists. The same kind of people who shit on craftivism are the kind of people who say that No King's Day was pointless, or the kind of people who say that wearing a button is pointless, the kind of people who say that signs of solidarity is pointless, the kind of people who believe that unless it is a massive rent strike or labor strike, that it doesn't matter, unless it's people who are willing to get arrested, that it's not actually real resistance. And a lot of those people also would argue that if it's not violence, then it's not real resistance. Those are people who believe a lot of misconceptions about how civil resistance works. So this is a chance to help educate them. Is knitting a red hat and wearing it to the grocery store or to No King's Day 3 going to make the fascists lay down and give up? No. Does that mean that it's silly, cringe, and pointless and does nothing? No. Effective resistance movements are ones that are welcoming and inclusive and encourage people to step into this work wherever they are at, to ask them to start to look at every action that they undertake through the lens of resistance. In the course of our daily lives, in small ways, how can we resist fascism any and every way that we can? If you live in a deeply red community, that might look like wearing a button that says impeach Trump or abolish ICE. Normalizing resistance to the regime by wearing a red hat, that's great. Those are called symbolic actions. Raising public awareness, normalizing resistance, those are important. And they actually are small acts of non-cooperation with the regime, but we need really big disruptive acts of non-cooperation to ultimately stop this. But again, we're dealing with millions of normies who've never participated in civil resistance before. It's really good to start them off small and to level them up to bigger actions. For very few people is their act of resistance some very big gesture. People start small and they build on those initial small success. They build their confidence and they start to want to take on bigger actions. More than that though, people have to feel invested in the cause, included in the community. They have to feel that people have their back before they are willing to engage in those much larger actions like big sustained protests, labor strikes, big boycotts. People need to feel that they belong in the movement. They need to have part of their identity folded up in the movement. And you do that, you help people get to that place, starting with these smaller actions like, hey, you want to knit a red hat and wear it? Additionally, craftivism events are community building events. Successful resistance movements are community focused, relationship focused. Do you know how much organizing was done for the civil rights movement around quilting bees, and also for the American Revolution around sewing, spinning, and quilting bees? Potlucks, book clubs, knit-ins, block parties, concerts, these are all really important community building events that help people feel invested in the movement, that help people build relationships, and also are really good for morale boosting and sustaining our longevity in this movement. And speaking of concerts, we know how valued, how important music is in resistance. Think of all of those protest songs. Are we all not singing Woody Guthrie right now? Likewise, visual art is praised and appreciated. Posters that communicate messages like propaganda for good, zines that are put out. Photography is highly valued, documenting what is happening. How many award-winning photographs are taken in times of conflict and lauded and valued, and they help create symbols for the movement. Again, it's that performance, it's that visual communication. But when it comes to fiber arts, knitting, spinning, weaving, quilting, sewing, those are always seen as less than. That's like invisible woman's work. It's an inferior form of art. Hence the reason Hope, who was big mad in my comments, called it just a hobby, right? The men who write the history books have been very neglectful of the way that the invisible skills, artistry, and labor of women, particularly when it comes to fiber arts, have been documented, have been recorded. So I think that we have this particular bias when it comes to craftivism, when it comes to knit-ins, when it comes to, pink hats or red Norwegian hats. And we need to unpack the way that that is very much rooted in misogyny and the ways that we've been enculturated to believe that fiber art is just like it's a little hobby. But protest songs, that's a real valuable contribution to the movement, right? Understand the bias there. So in response to Hope saying that knit-ins are essentially nose-picking against fascism, completely pointless and a waste of time, hopefully I've explained some of the ways that that's not true. And before I lose the light here, I want to read just a little bit from my notes. And maybe that can kind of help me summarize these two long videos. So remember, craftivism is community building. It's like having potlucks or having a block party. All kinds of conversations and organizing historically has been done around knitting circles and quilting bees. We can use craftivism as a fantastic conduit for fundraising. It's an entry point for people coming into this work for the first time. Folding people in through their interests and hobbies, great way to bring them on board, help them feel connected so that they are invested and want to level up to bigger necessary actions. We need the normies. Don't shit on people for taking those first steps. Don't call them cringe. Thank them for taking those first small risks and help them get plugged in so they can do more. There's also an important psychological component here that gets overlooked. People need to feel invested. They need to feel that they belong. They need to feel that they are contributing. And if they feel a little bit of that, they're going to want to do more. So when you look at the world wars, we actually didn't need people to knit by hand. We had knitting machines. But getting women in particular, who had sons and grandsons at the front, to knit socks for their loved ones, that had a profound psychological impact. People who otherwise felt hopeless and powerless, it gave them a sense of agency, a sense of belonging, a sense of contribution. Likewise, when men at the front got something that was lovingly hand knitted, they could believe like, oh, my sweetheart made that, my granny made that. And the morale boost for them was significant. And speaking of psychological impacts, symbols unite people. Red hats unite people. Immigrants welcome here buttons unite people. Those are symbols to other folks. Hey, I'm on your side. We're together in this. It tells people you're not alone. I'm with you. It also cultivates a culture of public opposition. You're walking around with a little fuck you to fascism all day long. Please understand that knit-ins and other craftivism events, knitting a hat, and wearing it at a protest, that's not going to stop fascism all on its own. But it is part of the bigger tapestry of how successful resistance movements operate. Community, investment, welcoming people in and leveling them up, giving folks a sense of ownership. Okay, I'm losing the light. It's getting really dark here, so I will leave it there for now. I would love to hear your thoughts, whether it's on the pink pussy hats, whether it's on the melt the ice Norwegian hats, or Craftivism in general.